so it's really my privilege and honor to introduce Mikko to the stage.
My name is Mikko. I live in Helsinki, which is in Finland, which is in Europe. In 1991, when I was a 21-year-old student, I joined a small startup as a programmer. Pretty quickly, I was reassigned from my programming duties to start to do reverse engineering with this new problem of computer viruses. MS-DOS viruses infecting IBM PCs and compatibles, spreading around the world on floppy disks. And for the younger people in the audience, this is a floppy disk. This is what USB thumb drives used to look like in the 1990s. So I started analyzing viruses, and I collected every single virus in the world. Around 150 viruses at the time. I had a box, this box right here, with 150 floppies, one virus on each floppy, and I reverse engineered every single one of them. So I had full expertise of the whole problem scenario, which would be very hard to do nowadays with millions and millions of malware we have today. But of course, the problem was very, very different. These viruses we were fighting in the late 1980s, early 1990s, were written by teenage boys, and they would basically play pranks with the users. They would infect your computer, then after 5 days, or after you've rebooted the computer 100 times, or on specific dates, it would show you something. A message, an animation. It might play some music, or randomly when you would try to run a program, you get a guy walking across your screen instead. So basically pranks, written by teenage boys. These boys were not benefiting in any way from these viruses they were writing. They made no money, they had no message, they didn't become famous. The problem was very, very different from where we are today. But it was a problem. Despite the fact that these viruses were more like pranks, many of them were destructive. These were infecting corporate networks, causing very serious problems. So companies needed solutions. And we started building solutions. This is our antivirus program from 1993, which we built together with a company from Iceland. And we're selling worldwide an MS-DOS antivirus program to detect and disinfect viruses spreading on floppy disks, or maybe viruses infecting program files that you could share on BBS systems. Internet, as we know it today, didn't yet exist. The web had not been invented yet, or it wasn't in mainstream use. And obviously, the platforms were very different, and spreading speeds of viruses and malware were totally different from today. Among the viruses I analyzed early in my career was Brain, which was already before my time. This is from 1986. I started in 1991. However, when Brain turned 25 in 2011, we had a meeting at the company talking about how we should do something. The first PC virus turns 25. We should do something. And I floated the idea that, what do you think if I try to go and find the guys who wrote the first PC virus? And the reason why I floated the idea was that I remembered when I had analyzed Brain in the beginning of my career, there was a hidden message inside the boot sector of every infected floppy infected by Brain. It never shows the message, but if you look at the boot sector, you'll find this text saying 730 Nissan Block, Alama Iqbal Town, Lahore. And then two names, Basit and Amjad. This is an address. So I took a camera guy with me and went to Lahore. This is me walking down the street of Nizam Block, Allama Iqbal town, finding number 730 and then knocking on the door. Who opens the door? Basit and Amjad. 25 years later, they were still there. And we had a really interesting discussion about why they wrote the Brain A virus in 1986 and how do they feel about it today. If you're interested in PC virus history, you'll find the full video from YouTube. And I don't have my original Brain.A floppy anymore, the original floppy that I analyzed in the beginning of my career. I don't have it because I gave it to Basit and Amjad. Thank you very much for this interview. And I brought Brain with me. I brought it home. It's for you. Thank you very much. Well, thank you. Now today, we don't fight viruses anymore. Viruses are no longer a thing. Yes, we do have malware, but we almost never nowadays find malware which would spread automatically. We don't find parasitic viruses or boot sector viruses or email worms or network worms. Today's attacks are quite different, like ransomware. Ransomware almost never replicates further. There's some exceptions, but typically a company gets hacked, and then the attackers manually do lateral movement and find servers and workstations and push the malware on these machines. It doesn't replicate automatically. And the reason why this has changed is that today the attackers want to make money. And if you want to make money, you don't want to create outbreaks of malware which get out of control and end up infecting millions of computers, bringing the case to front page news. If you want to make money with malware and you're on the front page of CNN.com, you failed. Like, you don't want publicity. And many of these early viruses became massively large outbreaks, much bigger outbreaks than what the creators thought. So in May 2000, we were the first company in the world to receive a sample of I Love You. I Love You, which went on to become the single largest email worm outbreak in history. You would receive this email worm through an email from someone you know. And the email would be titled, I Love You. And the attachment in the email was titled, loveletterforyou.txt.vbs. VBS, Visual Basic Script. So if you click on the attachment, now you just executed the attachment, and now you will send the same email to everybody in your address book as you. So you will send a love letter to your neighbors, to your workmates, to your boss, and they will click on it and it will spread further. I remember this case very well. We received the first sample in the morning, 9:41. We spent the next 48 hours trying to fight the outbreak and ultimately failing, because the virus went on to infect 200 million computers around the world. And today, at our offices in Helsinki, we actually remember this outbreak with an art piece. We opened up an art museum last September, the Museum of Malware Art, filled with modern art inspired by malware and viruses and cyber attacks. And this is an art piece called Click for Love, created by Kasper Hildén and Hugo Lampinen, made out of computer mouses painted pink to create a heart, because of course you used your mouse to click on the attachment, the love letter. But not all of these viruses were spreading over email. Around the same time, we started finding network worms, worms like Blaster, Slammer, Sasser, Nimda. Blaster would infect Windows computers by scanning IP addresses to find open ports. It was looking for port 135 TCP, the RPC port. And this is 2003. So most users would be running Windows XP. The latest version of Windows XP at the time was Windows XP Service Pack 1. Windows XP Service Pack 1 had a firewall, but by default, it was off. Just think about that. All Windows users on the planet, by default, were exposing all their open ports to anybody on the internet. That's hard to imagine nowadays. A lot of things have changed over these decades as we've been getting better and better in computer security. And Blaster was an amazing wake-up call, because it was the first which really started hitting infrastructure, shutting down flights, shutting down train traffic, infecting government networks. And these early network worms even caused the US Nuclear Regulatory Commission to put out a warning after this slammer worm infected internal networks of a nuclear power plant. And we were in the middle of all of this, collecting samples, reverse engineering them, naming viruses, building detection, writing descriptions, trying to protect our users. Here's what our lab looked like in 2004. At the time, we only had one lab that was in Helsinki, Finland, which meant that if there was an outbreak in the middle of the night, we worked in the middle of the night. Exciting times, also very tiresome work. I mean, it's kind of exciting when you get woken up in the middle of the night and you find the sample and you block the attack. You feel like you saved the world. But then when it repeats 2 days later and then 2 days later, we quickly realized we have to change the way we work and started to open up labs around the world so we wouldn't need to work in the middle of the night. And then we started seeing malware on things which were not computers, phones. Around 2005, we found Kabir and then ComWarrior. These were early mobile phone viruses infecting Symbian phones. Symbian was the operating system which was the most common operating system before Android and iPhone or iOS, running typically on Nokia phones. Here's in this video you can see the ComWarrior virus jumping from one infected phone to every other phone which is close enough. If you're in the Bluetooth range, you get infected. Sounds pretty bad. So we started building RF labs or Faraday cages where we could safely analyze these wireless viruses. We could infect handsets and test them without running the risk of the virus escaping. Because you could imagine someone visiting our offices with a mobile phone in their pocket while we're doing testing and it would just escape. So we had to test them in a safe environment. Now this is still the time before smartphones. Phones became smartphones, just like our TVs became smart TVs. Cars became smart, phones became smart, our watches became smart, cities became smart. Around 10 years ago, I was doing a talk somewhere and I just mentioned that, if it's smart, it's vulnerable. And that stuck. It's now on Wikipedia as the Hypponen law, which is a very pessimistic law, but it's also true. When we take everyday devices and we add functionality and connectivity, they become smart, but they also become hackable. Here's my watch. This is my Omega Seamaster. I've been carrying it for 24 years because I got it after 10 years service at the company. How do you hack my watch? A mechanical watch? Well, you don't. There's nothing to hack here. There's no chipsets, there's no CPU, there's no Wi-Fi, there's no Bluetooth. Many of you have a smartwatch in your wrist. Maybe an Apple Watch, maybe an Android watch, or Suunto, or Garmin. Many of them are very, very safe, but not unhackable. I mean, they run code written by people. People make mistakes. When coders make mistakes, we end up with bugs. When we have bugs in connected systems, they easily become vulnerabilities which can be exploited. So when we add connectivity and functionality to devices, they become smart, but they also do become vulnerable. Now, in my history of working in cybersecurity, I think that year 2003 is the biggest shift we saw. Because before 2003, it was still hobbyists and pranks. Around 2003, we started seeing the first money-making malware. First, to help spammers to build spam botnets, then banking trojans, then keyloggers to collect credit card numbers, and then eventually ransomware. So money entered the picture in 2003. During the same year, we found the first case that we were able to track down to a government. So governments started using offensive cyber power in 2003 as well. For spying, for espionage. Initially, the typical case would be that a target working for a ministry or for a defense contractor would receive an email spoofed to look like it's coming from someone they know and trust, with an attachment, like a PDF, a Word document, or an Excel spreadsheet, like this one right here, which then contains an exploit. When you open it, they take over your computer and start to steal the secrets. And once the gates were open for governments to use offensive cyber power, we started seeing more and more of these from various different governments. Initially China, then Russia, eventually United States. Stuxnet 2010, another seminal moment in history. When United States, together with Israel, writes malware targeting the nuclear enrichment systems of the Natanz research facility inside Iran, delaying the Iranian nuclear program considerably with software. Stuxnet has been discussed in different venues. There's great books written about it, but I also want to send a shout out to a great new project called Where Warlocks Stay Up Late, a YouTube video series created by Nathan Sportsman. There's an upcoming episode which speaks about Stuxnet in length, so check that out. When ransomware started to become the problem it is today, we started seeing that many of the ransomware gangs really paid attention to their brand. They wanted their victims to know that if you pay the ransom, they will deliver. So they created names and logos and brands for themselves and took care of delivering the goods. If you got infected, if your company was hit by ransomware and you paid the ransom, they would unlock your files. They wouldn't leak the files they stole. They wouldn't attack you again. However, in 2017, we saw WannaCry and then a month later, NotPetya, the two largest ransomware cases in history, neither of which delivered the goods. Even if you paid the ransom, you didn't get your files back. These two cases destroyed the reputation these ransomware gangs were trying to build for years. And the reason why WannaCry and NotPetya were different was that they were not written by criminals. They were both written by governments. North Korea wrote WannaCry. WannaCry was a ransomware written by a government trying to collect bitcoins from victims in order to fix their budget deficit. Which sounds insane, but that's exactly what happened with WannaCry. To make it more insane, WannaCry was spreading automatically. So this was a worm, a ransomware combined with a worm, and it was spreading using an SMB exploit, Eternal Blue, which was developed by the United States government, then stolen from the National Security Agency, sold online, Look at the prices, 750 bitcoins, but that was 2017. And then it ended up in the hands of North Korean government, which used it to attack targets right here in America with an exploit written by US government. How do we know it was North Korea? Well, the code similarities are pretty obvious, linking WannaCry back to the SWIFT banking attacks done by North Korea a couple of years earlier, and to the Sony Pictures attack of 2014, where North Korea attacked Sony Pictures because Sony was putting out a movie, a comedy movie, laughing at Kim Jong-un, the dictator of North Korea, and they retaliated by hacking the film studio. A month later, NotPetya. This one written by the government of Russia. NotPetya looks like ransomware, but it's not ransomware. It's actually a cyber weapon. A weapon designed to hit one country only, Ukraine. But it escaped the theater of the war and started hitting targets in the West, companies in Europe, in North America, in Asia. One of the most famous incidents was the Maersk shipping company, which ran into huge trouble. They had an office inside Ukraine, which got infected, and then through their internal network, it hit targets elsewhere. Let me play you a video clip from interviewing the chairman of Maersk.
That meant that we were actually collateral damage of a probably a state attack situation. The impact of that was that we basically found that we had to reinstall our entire infrastructure. We had to install 4,000 new servers, 45,000 new PCs, 2,500 applications, and
reinstall 45,000 laptops and desktops. Now, I know Andy, who was the CISO at Maersk at the time, and he told me about how hard it was to react when this actually happened. And it's the same story I've heard many times from CSOs and CISOs who were in the middle of something like this. Everything falls apart around you. None of your tools work. Your computers are crashing. You can't communicate with your teams because your systems are down. It doesn't really matter how much you train and do tabletop exercises when suddenly your team is in a state of shock. It's hard to work when you're in a state of shock. People get surprised and they're in a state of shock. They can't. You get my point? Now take that surprise and multiply it with 1,000, then imagine trying to run a recovery project, the most important thing you're supposed to do in your career. Like your company has been hit, it's up to you to recover the company, and you and your team are in a state of shock. That's hard to rehearse for. And we don't have to go to faraway countries to find examples of this happening. Just 2 years ago, right here in Las Vegas, the Alpha ransomware gang hit the MGM Grand and related hotels. That's the front page of the website of MGM Grand. If you were walking through the casinos, they would have these signs everywhere about computer problems, and the casino equipment was just showing blue screens left and right. You can imagine how expensive something like this is. And the reason why ransomware attacks like these have become such a big problem is Bitcoin. Money has become data. Cryptocurrencies are programmable money. This is money based on math instead of money based on politics. And when money is based on math, it's very hard to regulate it with regulations or laws, because math doesn't care about your laws. This is the reason why criminals love cryptocurrencies. Yes, there's other uses as well, but just like real-world criminals love cash, online criminals love cryptocurrencies. And the first time I heard about Bitcoin was in 2011. The Bitcoin white paper came out in 2009. Not much happened for the first 2 years, but in 2011 we found a piece of malware which was already mining for Bitcoins on infected computers. It created a botnet of all the computers it infected, and it was using the CPU of the computers to mine for Bitcoins, which you could still do at the time. And all cryptocurrencies have an automatic bug bounty built into them. Like if you can hack the system, well, you get the rewards. They don't really they don't need to have an official bug bounty because there is one built in right there. And these early mining malware, like Silent Miner, would do exactly that. They would infect people's computers and use the power of the computer to do the mining. Today, you can't mine for Bitcoin on consumer PCs, but with some other cryptocurrencies, you can still do that. But the real big shift in cybercrime was really the beginning of ransomware using Bitcoin for payment mechanisms. This is the very first one to do it. This is CryptoLocker of 2013. Today, there's an unlimited amount of gangs making millions with ransomware. I've started calling these gangs cybercrime unicorns. Just like we speak about tech startups, which are valued at $1 billion, that it's a unicorn company. Well, if you look at the revenue of some of these ransomware gangs, if you look at the wealth they control, if you look at their profits, if these would be companies, they would absolutely be categorized as startup unicorns. Now, of course, ransomware gangs will never do an IPO, so they're not real unicorns, but it's a good way of thinking about just how powerful they've become. And yes, they do branding, they have names, they have logos, they have websites. And I often show the websites of ransomware gangs when I'm speaking with leadership teams or board members about the likelihood of your company getting hit by ransomware. Because nobody believes they will be the next one. So what I do is that I just pull out my computer, open up a Tor browser, let's go to the website of Lockbit. You can see the onion address there in the top row right there if you want to visit it by yourself. Don't go with your work laptop, by the way, but that's the address. And then we'll look at other victims. Which companies have been hacked recently by a ransomware gang? And we have companies from Spain, there's a casino from Vegas, Argentina, Colombia, Uruguay, Brazil, Mexico, Iceland. Companies of all sizes, companies from all fields. Small companies, large companies, enterprises, everywhere around the world. Public companies, private companies, public sector, medical, anything. And then when you scroll the list, you realize that the list never ends. It never ends. Hundreds and thousands of victims from everywhere around the world, which pretty easily then opens up the eyes that if these companies were hit, then maybe our company can be hit as well. And the reason why it looks so random is that it is random. These attackers, they don't typically choose that let's go and hit companies in Canada today, or let's hit companies in Germany today, or let's hit steel mills, or let's hit banking sector. That's not the way they work. They have a vulnerability. They work with initial access brokers who have a way in. There's a weakness in this VPN server. If you haven't patched it in a year, we can get in. Then they just scan the whole internet to find all vulnerable servers, and you end up with a list like this. That's why it looks like somebody would have shot at the internet with a shotgun, hitting random targets. And these companies, or criminal gangs, They cooperated with each other. I'll play you a 1-minute-long promotion video from one of these ransomware gangs. This is from a gang called Global. Pretty neat, huh? This is not an endorsement. And I paused the video here to highlight the fact that yes, they are using AI already. Of course they are. AI-powered negotiation support to handle most of the discussion between the attackers and the victims. Of course, attackers use AI, just like we use AI to defend against attacks. And the reason why these gangs are able to do everything they do is the money. The money is very good. And we can tell that the money is good by looking at some of the guys who've been caught. So last September, a guy called Malone Lamb was arrested. And of course, he had the mandatory Lambo, complete with his name. But when you look at the list of the seized cars, seized by the authorities, it's actually pretty impressive. Several Lambos, several Ferraris, Rolls Royces, and a goddamn Pagani. So maybe the best thing we can do is to focus on catching more of these guys. And that's why I like the Rewards for Justice program, offering cash prizes for information leading to the arrest of some of the largest ransomware gangs in the world. Because these programs start to eat these gangs from the inside. And that's exactly what we want to happen. And we do have the occasional success stories. Like here, one of the Conti ransomware affiliates getting arrested, with law enforcement entering his home carrying a master key, a key which opens every door. Did you see the key? It looks like this. Works like this. And catching online criminals and putting them behind the bars not only takes that particular problem away, but it also shows to potential newcomers in the field that crime doesn't pay, not even online crime. But overall, I would claim that today, security is better than ever. And I know what it sounds like. Because it doesn't feel like it, does it? It doesn't feel like it because every other day we read about yet another data breach, yet another data leak, yet another ransomware incident. But if we just step back and think about where we've been and where we are today, it's like night and day. 10 years ago, just 10 years ago, the most common problem for your company would have been that users surf the web, click on links, and get infected just by clicking on links. That was the time of exploit kits like Black Hole. And the reason why you could get infected just by clicking on a link was that you were running Java and Flash plugins inside of your browsers, which were easily exploitable. We've done so much in removing plugins and extensions, improving browser security, and improving operating system security. And maybe the best example of this is, maybe a bit surprisingly, Xbox. I learned early in my career that if attacker gets physical access, if the attacker is on the keyboard of the computer they want to hack, it's game over. If they have physical access, they can do anything. They can open up the computer, take out the chips, replace the chips, remove the hard drive. Well, that's no longer true. Xbox One has been out for 12 years. There's no jailbreak for Xbox One. It's a Windows computer, but nobody's figured out a way to run your own programs on this Windows computer, despite the fact that they have the computer, they own the computer, they have it in their hands, they can do anything they want. Nobody's figured out how to do it. Why am I speaking about game consoles? Because this is an Xbox. The phone in your pocket is essentially the same thing. It's a computer which is locked down, restricted. You can't run arbitrary programs on it. Maybe the biggest single improvement in computer security over the last 15 years has been the introduction of these more restrictive operating systems like iOS and Android, Chromebook, things like that. And I know some of you are thinking that how can I praise security of iPhone when at the same time we know that it can be hacked. It has been hacked with things like Pegasus, which is true. However, Pegasus, you can't just download Pegasus. It's a commercial program sold only to intelligence agencies. Criminals don't have it. Only intelligence agencies have it. And the price for Pegasus is something like $100,000 per victim. And I'm sorry to tell to you, but you're not worth $100,000. Very few of us are. You know, politicians, CEOs, ministers, that kind of things. That's who are targeted with these. And if it costs $100,000 to hack your phone, that's not a security failure. That's a security success story. If it costs $100,000 to do it, that's a success story. And all this means that attackers are finding easier ways in. If it's hard to overcome the technical restrictions, then they go through the users. Scamming the user, fooling the user, phishing the user. Now, I'm not blaming the user here. I sort of hate the phrase that user is the weakest link. That's almost too easy to say. Like if there's a link that the user must never click, why is the link on the user's computer to begin with? We really should stop putting responsibility on end users who can't handle the responsibility and put the responsibility to where it belongs. And the responsibility for cybersecurity really belongs to the people in this room. It belongs to you and me. Instead of blaming the user, we should take the responsibility that we, cybersecurity people, really should be carrying instead. So it's quite clear that scams will get worse in the future. It's also quite clear that ransomware is only getting started. We've now seen the first decade of corporate ransomware attacks. That's only the first decade. It will continue. It will get worse. As long as there's millions and millions that are being made, there will be more gangs, more attackers. And I do believe that AI is the key. Because that's one of the few fields where defenders are ahead of the attackers. All the cybersecurity companies here will tell you how extensively they use generative AI in their products. Yes, attackers are using AI as well, but they're only beginning. We've only seen fairly simple attacks with AI so far. It will change, but right now I would claim we are ahead. And the challenge we face as cybersecurity people is that our work is invisible. When you do your job perfectly, the end result is that nothing happens. When you do your job 100%, when you prevent all the attacks, it only means nothing happened. And people don't see when nothing happens. I often call this cybersecurity Tetris, because we all know the rules of Tetris. What you're trying to do in Tetris is to make a whole line, and when you make a whole line, what happens? It disappears. So your successes disappear while your failures pile up. That's what happens in Tetris. That's what happens in cybersecurity. And rarely is anyone thanked for stopping a disaster that didn't happen. Or in other words, let me quote Ken Keeler, when you do things right, people won't be sure you've done anything at all. And every technology revolution we've seen brings us benefits and problems. No matter how much we'd love to get just the benefits, we will get the problems as well. We've seen it with the revolution of connectivity, with mobility, with smartphones, with social media, and now we are seeing it with artificial intelligence. AI is the biggest technological revolution I've seen in my life. Over the last 2 years, a couple dozen 0 days have now been discovered by large language models. 0 days. In 2024, there were 0 days discovered by large language models. Now I'm already losing count, a couple of dozen of these. All of the ones we know of have been found by researchers, which is great. When researchers find security vulnerabilities with AI, that's great because then we can fix them. When attackers do the same, that's awful. That's going to happen as well. So in 1991, when I joined Data Fellows, the company where I work for many, many years, I didn't really see how the world would change. If somebody would have told me in the beginning of my career that eventually I won't be fighting teenage boys writing boot sector viruses, but that we would be fighting organized online crime gangs, making millions, or fighting foreign militaries, or intelligence agencies, I wouldn't have believed that. That would have sounded like science fiction. But that's where we are today. Data Fellows eventually migrated and split into 2 companies that still exist today, F-Secure and WithSecure. I work today on the WithSecure side. But this is my last week. I resigned in May. My notice period ends next Tuesday. Next Thursday, I'm switching industries. I'm joining a defense contractor called SensoFusion, which builds drone defense systems. So I'm going from antivirus into anti-drone. Why? Well, I live 2 hours away from the Russian border. There's a war, dead center of Europe right now. War which looks different from any of the wars we've ever seen before. War which is extensively moving in the direction of UAVs, and not just flying drones, but also marine drones and ground drones. And there's a lot of similarities here. I've been fighting programmable threats all my life. Threats which are trying to avoid detection, and we're trying to detect them. Threats which will change behavior to avoid detection, and then we have to update our detection. That's exactly what I've been doing in cybersecurity, and that's exactly the same scenario in drone defense. And I've always thought that there's a lot of meaning for me to work in cybersecurity, but I also believe that for me, right now, there's more meaning in anti-drone, and that's why I'm making the shift, because the phase of conflict and the phase of war is changing right now, and I will be doing what I can in this new field. And that means it's time for thank yous. I've been working all my life in cybersecurity, and I will continue to be involved in cyber in the future as well. I will still do talks if people want to hear them, but I will no longer be working in the cybersecurity industry. So thank you. I am here because of you. I am here because of you. Thank you for giving me a home for 34 years. Thank you very much. Thank you for your work.
Fantastic.